Chicago area janitors and gentlemen. This is a response to mccainisthrough and her latest cut and paste complete debunking of YouTube kook detector. This will be a two-part response as well because won't be able to get it all in one part. We appreciate mccainisthrough mentioning us by name on her channel. We like the extra exposure, if you know what I mean. I urge everyone to watch her video and click more info on the right side. After reading those words, I began to wonder if mccainisthrough was going to need a bottle and a blankie. mccainisthrough is simply saying this is the last time she's going to respond. She's indirectly responded to us before. Last time she's going to respond to us because she can't deal with an elongated debate and she can't deal with dissent. So she hurriedly put this video together so she could claim to have refuted us when she's barely scratched the surface and didn't do a very good job on this video. We have refuted this user over a dozen times. Check the appropriate playlist on our channel. Let's get started with a surgical dissection of this user's nonsense. This lone user, utilizing a distorted voice, makes a rather curious statement at the 6-minute 30-second mark. She says, "We generally don't provide links because most of the subject matter is obvious." mccainisthrough, imagine actually attending high school. Imagine going up to your 10th grade science teacher and saying, "I didn't provide citations for my report because the subject matter is obvious." You'd get laughed right out of the building. Well, you did. You've asserted that 1998 is the hottest year on record. Keep in mind most of that data comes from surface air temperature measurements. Not satellite data. And she probably thinks that's obvious, but it's not. Steve McIntyre of Toronto operates www.climateaudit.org and began to investigate the data and methods used to arrive at the results that were graphed by NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies. Again, we've been over this before. What he discovered was truly amazing. Since NASA does not fully publish the computer source code and formulae used to calculate the trends in the graph, nor the correlation used to arrive at the corrected data, he had to reverse engineer the process by comparing the raw data and the processed data. Steve McIntyre posted this data from NASA's newly published data set from Goddard Institute of Space Studies. These numbers represent deviation from the mean temperature calculated from temperature measurement stations throughout the USA. According to the new data published by NASA, okay, are you hearing me there? Hello? Hello, McFly? According to the new data published by NASA, 1998 is no longer the hottest year ever. 1934 is. I've been over this before. Either mccainisthrough ignored it or only delves into popularized research. There are two reasons she doesn't provide references. Number one, she doesn't want people to be able to check where she's getting this information from and thus start to pick apart her work. Two, she doesn't really have any references and she's just copying talking points. I'll let the viewers figure out which it is. Excuse me. It's quite amusing to see mccainisthrough get wound up over someone simply asking for references. If you look at her previous videos I've responded to, you won't see any citations or links on the right side unless she inserted them recently. Beginning at the 250 mark, she doesn't dispute my evidence for cold spells in Idaho, Montana, and Austria, but does give a curious objection, saying those areas are too small. This is a rather curious objection, especially considering I went over data showing the entire U.S. had a very cold October. She basically brushes it aside. Note that she didn't dispute it, the data itself, saying things like 2009 is shaping up to be one of the hottest years on record, along with 10 of the last 12, which have been the hottest in over 150 years, keep that in mind, of global temperature record keeping. End quote. She also ignores the climate change tree ring data from New Zealand that I gave in the video she's responding to, although she didn't link to the video she's responding to, saying that's not Australia. Last time I looked at a map, though, kiddo, Australia and New Zealand were in the same region, therefore my evidence is applicable. Again, she didn't dispute the data itself. She just tried to brush it aside with this curious objection. As she's done in the past, mccainisthrough ignores evidence I provided for climate change before those evil automobiles were around, and even quoted it from one of my previous videos. In my Simple Facts of Man-Made Global Warming response to mccainisthrough, I went over massive climate change in Canada, the Sahara, and China long before the evil automobile was invented. In my I'm Voting Democrat video, I went over evidence of a 6.5 to 10 foot rise in sea level in Mexico about 120,000 years ago. Now do a video, mccainisthrough, where you plunk China, Canada, Mexico, and the Sahara down on a map of Australia. Which one do you think's larger? She'll object to this, saying something to the effect of, but that's not Australia. The point is, we've seen these climate changes before, long before the evil automobile. Next, she'll claim that rising CO2 levels are going to kill us, forgetting that CO2 is less than 4% of the atmosphere. We've pointed this out as well many times. And man-made CO2 is less than 4% of that. Again, see our playlist. Using one of her lines, I'll try to do it in the distorted voice. Maybe not. I don't need a distorted voice. It's kind of like throwing, here's what she'd say. It's kind of like throwing an ice cube in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. End quote. The link between higher CO2 and methane causing higher temperatures can be disputed. Again, I'll have I'll have the links at the right side there. You can check all this information out. As reported in Science 310, published in 2005, we now have CO2, methane, and temperature data from East Antarctica stretching back 650,000 years. Another point I'd like to make, she's talking about high temperature trends over the last 150 years. How old's the Earth in your view, mccainisthrough? You're going to say about 4.57 billion years. 150 years in a 4.57 billion year time frame is laughable. That's no long-term evidence on a 4.57 billion year old Earth. You're an idiot. Okay, we got that. We have the CO2, methane, and temperature data from East Antarctica going back 650,000 years. One of the links on the right side of her video even alludes to this. The new ice core data indicate the atmosphere's current CO2 concentration is about 30% higher than it has been at any other time in the last 650,000 years. And that the atmosphere's current methane concentration is 130% higher. These extremely high concentrations, in the words of Jerry McManus of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, are geologically incredible. Hence, if the world's climate alarmists are correct about the tremendous warming power they attribute to these two top greenhouse gases, one would logically expect the Earth to be currently experiencing some incredibly high temperatures. So what do the ice core data indicate in this regard? Both the Dome, Concordia, and the Vostok data suggest that the peak temperature of the current interglacial or Holocene was not incredibly higher than the peak temperature of all the past 4 interglacials, the earliest of which is believed to have been nearly identical to the Holocene in terms of Earth's orbit around the Sun. In fact, the Holocene's peak temperature was not higher than those of the preceding 4 interglacials by even a tiny fraction of a degree. In fact, it was lower. In fact, the work of Pettit in Nature 399, published in 1999, revealed that the peak temperature of the Holocene was more than 2 degrees centigrade lower than the average peak temperature of the prior 4 interglacials. What is more, Earth's current temperature is lower still, so we have higher methane and CO2 concentrations now, but yet it was warmer in the past in East Antarctica. So there goes your little data trying to link higher CO2 means higher temperature. Not necessarily. Again, this is peer-reviewed literature. This isn't something you read next the fish tank next to the periodical next to the fish tank in your dental office. We will continue this in part 2.